for joining us for Woke Moments, a conversation on issues and hot topics impacting young generations. My name is Janet Kelly, and I am the Executive Director of Sanctuary of Hope, as well as your host. So now let's jump into a moment of awakening.
Woke Moments!
Wake up, everyone. This is Janet Kelly, Executive Director of Sanctuary of Hope. I'm very excited to have a discussion today about Sanctuary of Hope's Southern Africa trip, in which we took a Sanctuary of Hope delegation of young, up-and-coming, emerging leaders on a leadership development trip around racial equity and understanding the intersectionality between South Los Angeles and South LA. And so we have with us for our guests to talk about the South African trip, Tanisha Saunders, who is a community activist, I would say one of our strong and emerging and growing leaders here within the Los Angeles region. And we're welcoming you to share a little bit kind of like what your perspectives and reflections are, or any reflections you had about the trip to South Africa. And also we'll delve into a little bit about not only the perspective, but the emotions of what it was like to be in a foreign country and having or being a part of a transatlantic trip to connect with our brothers and sisters across the ocean. So let's start with you introducing yourself, sharing a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tanisha Saunders. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, Compton, California, and I currently work as a live-in resident coordinator in a transitional housing program for transitional age youth who are exiting out of homelessness. And a little bit about myself is I am a former foster youth. I am someone who experienced homelessness as a part of my growing up and just everyday challenges and navigating systems. I graduated from Cal State University, Dominguez Hills, Go Toros.
Go Toros.
And through my various experiences, I am an activist and advocate. I've had some great opportunities to be a part of policy making locally in Los Angeles. And through my activism and advocacy, I was fortunate enough to connect with Miss Janet Kelly, and I'm so grateful for that because this opportunity to do this cultural exchange and learning experience about the intersections between South LA and Southern Africa was just an experience that was very humbling and definitely life-changing. I can't say that I would have ever had this opportunity had it not been for Sanctuary of Hope and the generosity of Janet Kelly, the organization, and the donors who donated to our campaign to get us going. So I'm very excited to be here and to be sharing this experience. I'm still coming down from the whole experience. So when I got here today, I was like, oh, let's get everybody back in the room, just because there's a lot that still needs to be processed. So I'm very happy to be here to process this with you all and to answer these questions honestly, or to engage in this conversation honestly, because I really think it's important.
So when I'm thinking back, setting foot, once we touched down in Johannesburg and we actually exited the plane and setting foot on the soil of Africa, what was that experience like? I know for me it was so euphoric. It was one of those like, I can't believe my foot is being planted on the soil in Africa. And it was a moment. I mean, it was, and it seemed like a moment that lasted for eternity because it was just so surreal. And so, what would you say was what was it like for you to exit the plane in Johannesburg and set your foot on soil in Africa?
I'm gonna be honest. I think that was a 15-hour flight, so I think it didn't really hit me like that. But listening to you describe it as surreal, I would describe that as my whole entire experience. Like, I am attached to my phone. I'm probably gonna go to those self-help groups later on in life about how my phone is just so attached to me. But on the trip, I made the conscious decision to not be on my phone. So I didn't really even get pictures because I wanted to just be immersed in the situation. So when you say surreal, that was pretty much my whole experience, that it was just, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm taking this all in. But yeah, it was pretty interesting to me because the weather, it felt like being in LA. I mean, even though sometimes when we got to Zimbabwe, it was raining 1 second, then dry, and then it just overcast. But it felt surreal because it felt like I was home. And I'm not sure if that was specifically because of our leadership and because of the connections we had and how everything was intentional. It felt like I was on a trip with my family going to another continent. And so as surreal as it was very calm at the same time.
It's interesting because everyone on our trip talked about this being the homecoming, the return of in a sense an identity of knowing this is a place, a space, a continent, anywhere within the continent almost, of where we had come from. And the whole experience from Lorraine and Pastor Saul's family, who put together this warm, welcoming dinner of a variety of people representing Johannesburg, those that are within faith, those are within entertainment. And so, although we were a guest of honor, it was just like coming home to the cookout, just a cookout here in the United States. And it just seemed everywhere we went, whether it was in Soweto, Cliptown, even when we fellowship with Jireh Ministries and Eliom Community Church, it was just such a welcoming atmosphere where you did not feel as if you were out of place. It was as if we linked the jigsaw puzzle.
And Johannesburg was definitely black, so it felt like we were in South LA when we got off the plane. Just black people smiling, loving life, the fashion, the hairstyles. It was just a great impact of a cultural exchange. And even our living accommodations felt like home. Felt like
waking up in the morning, having a breakfast, a full array of a breakfast, sitting down, having an exchange about what happened during the day, or even just having visitors come out to welcome us. I thought that was, it was really amazing. It's hard to put words on some of the things that happened, but even walking out and being able to breathe fresh air.
Yeah,
fresh air.
The excitement of being present.
It's a lot. Being there. So let's kind of move through the trip a little. So the first stop that we went to was Johannesburg, and we were able to visit Soweto, and spend some time in Cliptown, right? So you said that it was not any different than being in parts of South LA. So when we talk about intersectionality, what would you say were the things that you found that was similar between South LA, Cliptown, and Soweto?
Similar. I would definitely say church. I mean, I feel like we're not as lit as their churches are. Lit means just super hype, live. Like, I can't remember a time that I've seen people just so excited about God and dancing. Actually, there's this one church in Compton that they get lit on Sundays too. I was like, is this the club? Okay. We clubbing for Jesus today. That really resonated with me. The various levels of existence. So we got to see levels of poverty, people living in I forgot what they're called, the different types of houses that they had. The shanty towns. Then we got to meet people who were lawyers, very established, and living different lives. And then we got to see people who were working class. So I think those various waves of blackness was something that we got to see, and much similar to Los Angeles. The different economic styles, like there was a lot of entrepreneurship, just a lot of different ways to make money. When we went to the Mandela House, you just saw how it was like a informal yet formal market. And so it reminded me of downtown LA. It reminded me of the alley. Where you just had fashion, you had all these different things to shop for, and we also saw similarities because we went to the malls. That was at first I was like, we only going to the malls. I felt like that was like our number one restaurant. Let's go to the food court. We're like, we came to South Africa and we going to the food court. But then you got to appreciate it because at the same time, the different food styles, some of our bodies were just adjusting to. That was a big thing.
And Coke had no sugar in it.
Oh,
it was like the variations of soda was different. Like
the low cajole.
Maybe I was on a fructose high, or I don't know what it is. It's in regular Coke or whatever it is. But Coke there was different. And even when you looked at the can, it would say less sugar, no sugar, just a lot of the content. Where
very conscious
of what they were eating. Yeah, I felt really bad.
The portion sizes different was the prices that was less expensive.
Right.
It's like I could get me 3 meals for the price of one. No way.
So I want to circle back to when you talked about churches and worship, because I think one of the things when we talk about leadership and what we learn becomes really important in that aspect, because worship there was quite different. And, you know, here in the United States, I mean, there have been claims that those attending church, I mean, the actual people attendance in church is starting to decline. And it's being visually kind of, it's visual. I mean, everyone, I mean, a lot of churches are experiencing that, but other churches aren't, you know, depending on their relevancy and where they're located. But one of the things that was very, what I thought was a point of the whole intersectionality was in looking at Christianity. Because even those of us who are, depending on how we identify, Black, African American, have a strong connections to our faith. And faith for a lot of us is Christianity. And oftentimes we have looked at Christianity as a religion that has been used, or as a religion that has been weaponized, right? It's been weaponized in slavery. It's been weaponized to divest people of property. It's been a religion that's been used to as a form of imperialism and colonialism. But yet at the same time, when you look at it from a historical perspective here in the United States and also there in South Africa, you see how culturally, you could take religion, bring it into something of your own, and put it back out into something that could be empowering or spirit filled, depending on how you want to take it and embrace it. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I would say filled me, because, you know, when you think about, I can't remember who it was that was talking about the story of, you know, how Christian, it was reading Trevor Noah's book, right? So when Trevor Noah was talking about the variations of church, you know, going to the black church and then the white church, and even knowing how what the white church in its sense of, or in its connection to Christianity, was still a part of apartheid, was a part of the colonization, also a part of, you know, stripping the resources from the folks there who were indigenous and original to the country. And so, and I think oftentimes, even now, into this day, there's always this struggle around Christianity and faith and its role, right? Its role in either changing or correcting what was done in history, right? And then what and how do Black people see the role of Christianity and the church now in advancing racial equity, in advancing or addressing racism as we know it now in the 21st century.
And I see, well, I can speak from my personal experience, because I don't religiously go to church. I've actually had conflicts between religion, faith, and spirituality since I was younger, and I think that we might be seeing that trend of there not being a lot of people going to churches, because, you know, I don't want to put it all on millennials, but I feel like we're in this age of confrontation.
But I think that that's important for us to talk about, even for myself, who is a Christian. I am a Christian, and I just even know for myself how my own view of my faith has evolved over time. And I think even part of my personal growth and evolution in Christianity is really, too, understanding its impacts on culture, but also understanding how Christianity and religion needs to be very revolutionary and transformative. And transformative in the sense of righting past wrongs and being change agents in the struggle for racial equity. So we'll move on and pass talking about
Okay, talk about religion and skip, boom.
religion. Would you like to add something else to that?
I was just overjoyed to see the churches that we went to, the participation, and just how equally at both churches, how the energy was there, how it was very community based.
Yes.
And I think that that's the most important thing when you look at religion and churches, is it serving the community? Is it really addressing the needs of the community? And from what I saw, I thought that it was, and just their light and excitement about being at church was very infectious. And so, you know.
The community dance at the end,
Yeah, it was very fun.
I think it was very fun. It set it off, but it was a kind of another embracement into the culture. That was an experience of a lifetime.
It definitely was.
Yes, definitely an experience of a lifetime. So, also a part of our Johannesburg, we got to meet with Dr. Maki Mandela, Mandela's oldest daughter. And so she shared a lot with us. I mean, it was a lot to take in, even about how we need to build ourselves economically, how and where where we need to see ourselves in various, I don't want to use the word struggles, but how we need to see ourselves in various moments, right? Because a lot of times, even in history in itself, Black women aren't often recognized for a lot of the contributions that we make in movements, and we're often relegated to the supportive role and not the actual leadership in which we've taken, right? In either advancing civil rights or during the apartheid movement, even with Winnie Mandela, you know, her role in advancing or ending apartheid in South Africa. But there's so many women that are a part of movements that make significant change that we can't ever feel defeated, right? We can't ever feel defeated, but we also always need to know that we need to tap within to that self-empowerment, or that
because it's not going to be given to us.
It's not going to be given to us.
It's still a part of the continuous fight. Not that women weren't existing during all these uprisings, but it's just like, no matter what, the story is always going to be taken and construed and highlighted for the men. So it was very empowering and a strong reminder to not only know that our role has never been in one place. We Black women in the struggle, or women have always been in multiple levels, on the front line, in the middle, in the back, to the side, having everyone covered. And it's just that our roles have never been, they haven't been as highlighted. So it's just that reminder that empowerment during times of trials and tribulations has to come from within, because it's not something that's going to be given to you no matter how much work that you do. And so kind of even hearing how, you know, she's even still related to as Nelson Mandela's daughter, though she has her doctorate. She's a doctor of anthropology, and the work that she continues to do to still have to not fight for her shine, but walk in her own light and really take, like, that's a part of her life, but it's not her whole identity. And so it was very powerful to hear that. And I really got excited from the moment we stepped into the Mandela House, just remembering the experiences of his children with Winnie Mandela, and basically seeing how their house was getting shot up, how they lived in a prison to a certain extent, how they were always being watched, and to continue to strive and fight for freedom while your family is being treated and held down a certain way. So to hear about all the power of the women just made me go back to even thinking about you and the work that you do in South LA, and the work that you do with your organization. You know, as a Black woman, you're fighting and people want to come to you for your opinions, but it's like, well, we're doing the work out here. I'm not just an opinion. What are you giving back? What is that cultural exchange? We are always expected to show up and show out, but it's got to be a balance. And so,
because one of the things that I thought about at the Mandela House was I had a flashback of when I did the Mississippi Solidarity trip, which was kind of a redo of the 21st century. In the 21st century, the freedom rides that happened during the civil rights movement. And so when I was looking at the bullets that were there at Mandela's house, it made me think of when I actually went to Medgar Evers' house, and going to Medgar Evers' house and still seeing the blood stain that was there.
How low his children's bed were.
And how low his children's bed were. You mean the blood on his driveway in the concrete, how low his children's beds were, as well as, you know, some of where the bullets had the trajectory of the bullets had actually, where they had went. And even visiting Jackson State University, going to his office, right, where he had the various offices, and even in one of the offices where folks believe that he may have worked out of, there were bullet holes there too. So it's when you think the Jim Crow era or pre kind of civil rights era, and the injustices that people and at that time is when you think about South Africa, you know, it's a lot to live in terror. You know, I mean the level of terror, racial terror, right, that you had to live through had to be so immense. So how can one? And I'm thinking about myself. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I would have the mental capacity to live in that level of racial terror. I just don't. I mean, for myself, I don't think I would have the mental capacity.
And I think, looking back and revisiting history is so powerful because you look and see how people were able to do it despite their environments. Yes. And then you're able to look back at where we are in Los Angeles, United States of America, and see how we have a certain sense of complacency because it may not look exactly how it did, but I feel like the same, if not similar, reign still continues. But because we've had slight advancements, it doesn't look or feel like that. But when you get to the nitty gritty and you look at the statistics and where we are as far as, being in prison, being murdered in the streets in our communities, right, being murdered by police officers, the terror is still there, but because it looks different, we think it feels a little bit different. So we're saying we can't exist in those eras when we are to a certain extent.
So we got to Cape Town, right? And we had the dinner. We had the dinner with our Cape Town family. One of the
I think I was asleep a little bit for that one.
Yeah, you fell asleep. They took pictures of you, but it's okay.
I need to see No, I don't need to see those pictures.
But remember, one of the dinner guests had a question about the Black Lives Matters movement, right? And it was the question was, how are Black people doing? Because they felt a sense of, I don't want to say a sense of sadness, but they felt a sense of needing to be connected to what that really meant. Because at our table, they were talking about, well, how do you feel about police killing Black people? Because police don't, it's not like they were doing it there. Yeah. And then when we were talking around the dinner table, we were talking about how, what it's like to be Black in America, and and what it's like to be fearful of the police, especially when any potential interaction, regardless if you're good or if you're considered bad, criminal, non-criminal, how you're viewed in any moment in time could mean potentially you could lose your life, right?
Right.
And so we were talking about that. So the question was, well, how are you all doing? How are you all dealing with that?
The level of concern was so real, and it's just interesting to see what's picked up on, and I'm happy that that's a global understanding. Unfortunately, I think even some African countries, or was it Caribbean, there's like an alert out that you have to be careful coming to America, the United States,
especially if you're engaging with law enforcement,
because of being engaged. So it's great that we have these conversations, because it really is tough to navigate these.
And I think the perspective is so different because when you're in communities where you are a majority, right? Because we were in a country where Black people, or Black hue of skin, your hue of skin, right, are a majority. When we get ready, or when we're talking about our return to our country, we're coming back to a country where we are a minority. So our thinking and our outlook and our view of things are quite different. So you can understand.
It's quite different in Cape Town too, because Black people are a minority in Cape Town as well. Yes. It's colored people and white people who are majority in Cape Town, but I think all over South Africa, it's black people are majority, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Because I thought that there was
right.
there was a shift there too in how things were speaking. I think especially when we're in Cape Town, that's when I heard more of the colored conversation and was able to see it.
Right. So this was interesting because we were talking at our table because they were talking about, because in Africa they had the variations, the white, colored, and black, right? Either you're white, colored, or black. And so one of the conversations centered around, if you're colored, you can't qualify for some of the programs that are out there to advance for individuals who are considered black, right? So if there are things that we would consider here in the United States affirmative action, if you're colored, you're not black enough, right? Or you're colored, so you're not black enough to be considered black, but you're definitely not white to take advantage of all those privileges of being white. And when you think about it here, sometimes when we think that we're operating, or when we're constantly operating in our duality, we know what we're black enough to do or be able to achieve in our blackness. But we know what when we're operating in our duality, and we believe, or we are trying to attempt to reach a level of whiteness on a comfortability level, we know that we will never have that, or we don't have it, or we may not have it,
and we didn't have
in a form of privilege that if you were white you would have.
And a formalized privilege.
Privilege.
So addressing the systemic and institutional levels of oppression, it's just like it's not on top. Because I think I overheard the presidency. Well, we've had a white president, we've had a black president, now we need a colored president. And I'm like, we need the best president that's going to represent the cause. And sometimes it's those conversations that really take us back. But I also think that those conversations need to happen and need to be addressed, because you still see the levels of variation as far as the numbers. Who, I guess I didn't look at the numbers of the country, but just from what I was physically seeing, I didn't see a lot of impoverished colored people when we went to Langa, or because they live in different areas and sectors. So to a certain extent, I can hear the conversations and the need to have them, but I think we're still focused on the color and the race. So it's really difficult to have those conversations because I really don't know too much about the history. But for me, I'm about, going to where the support is most needed. Right. And going into Langa, seeing the beautiful communities, but also seeing the levels of how they were operating and how, it just wasn't supported. Or when looking at their community center that mysteriously, the drugs were mysteriously brought into their community, and then you got to see their community center, just taken apart. So you just see the different levels of racism that still exist, and how they're still very much so cornered off in their different sanctions. Right. Because, I was just like, y'all just black, everybody's just black to me. Oh, okay, there's a difference. Right. And you feel that difference because we were looked at differently. Like, oh, you're Americans. Oh, do you have money? Are you an actor?
There's something
Do you have money? And I was just like, wow, I didn't notice that when we got to Cape Town, there weren't as many black tourists. The black people we saw in Cape Town, there were a couple sprinkled here and there. Right. But then the other people who were like at the waterfront, Fisherman's Wharf, they were working. They were trying to get tips and different things like that. So it was pretty interesting to see the different dynamics and how racially things broke down or how the experiences may have changed. It still felt like black people were cornered off.
Right. So there's this whole movement here, and I wanted to go back to your trip to Langa because I didn't get a chance to go because I got sick, but I got to hear a lot about what you all had experienced there. But, there's this whole synergy and movement around co-ops and cooperative economics as a means to liberate, right? Liberate black people. And Langa was an example of a cooperative in which they were producing goods, selling the goods, and from the proceeds of that, it was reinvested back into the cooperative, right? So what was some of your kind of reflections on?
Oh, that's a good question, because I don't remember having the conversation about the cooperatives. I think we got to see Green Clean, or I don't even want to butcher the name of his company, but we got to meet with a local entrepreneur who started his cleaning business. And so we got to see how his business basically took root from an idea or starting small, and then now he provides, job opportunities for people in his community. And then we also met with another gentleman who was in tech. He was in coding. He codes, and then he goes into the community and teaches a coding class to the youth in the community, and he was awarded a grant. So the co-op, that's a good question. There was a lot going on. I'm not gonna say we didn't talk about it ever, but we, from what I took from it, was just their social entrepreneurship and innovation, and taking things that exist or finding opportunities where they aren't plentiful, but then also giving back to their community, and it not just being about making money. It's really being about elevating their community and advocating for their community based on their different needs. So that's what I took from Langa. I wish Pastor Sauls was here.
I wish he was here too, but he's in South Africa right now. But I think
Yebo.
Yebo. So I think one of the things that we wanted to hit home as a part of the leadership development trip, and especially visiting Langa, is being able to see opportunity where you might not see it, and looking at it through the cooperative lens of how can we create, right? How can we create economies? How can we create employment opportunities and have ongoing investments, right, within our neighborhoods and our communities that don't really have to be so capitalistic in its structure, because everyone is benefiting when you're in a co-op.
And it's feeding a need.
And
like we also went to Jordan's, and we got to hear how he, created this restaurant because he noticed there wasn't like dining options in his community. So he's feeding their needs and also creating an environment that's welcoming, and also putting on for the children. Like he does a lot of events for the children, for families. So it's not just based off of capitalism, it's based off of an environment, it's based off of loving and living life, and not just being seen at, we were talking about earlier, taking ownership of your story and telling your story. And here you have individuals who created businesses, but also give back into their community. And I thought the food was delicious, the environment was pretty great, and it gives hope, because you hear a lot of people in South LA who, say just get up out the hood, don't come back, don't look back. Right. And it's like these aren't just hoods, these are communities, these are people. This is where you grew up, despite how you grew up, despite what traumas you've experienced. This is still life. These are still opportunities that need to exist, because I think of myself in a lot of ways, like my story isn't unique when I go back to my community. This is a lot of variations of what I experienced is still happening. So how do we go back to our community and empower members in our community to stay afloat, to continue having faith and continue living life? And so to see them, have these ideas and live their life and put on for their community, and it was really empowering. And I'm grateful that we got that opportunity to not just ride around and look from a car, but to really get out and interact, because these are people, and just how we're people in South LA. We're more than just our stories, and more than just, what is it, poverty pimping
Right.
opportunities, because there's so much beauty and variation in those communities, and everyone has a story, and just there's just such a love of life, through everyone you met. I can't remember a time, of meeting somebody who wasn't smiling, or meeting someone who didn't like us. Maybe they just kept it pushing. But I really enjoyed that. And I think that's a part of the peace that I'm experiencing
Right.
now is, are we going to do something about it? If
Right.
not, okay, well then we can't just complain. Here
Right.
you are, you have people who you wouldn't have been able to think about that, because I think sometimes we're in a box.
Right, we
But
are.
here you are, like with the cleaning business. He said
Right.
he was just cleaning out bins because he just looked and saw, let me clean my neighbor's bin. And then he looked up a couple of months later, and people wanted that, because nobody wants to live in filth,
Right.
know?
Right. So, Apartheid Museum. The Apartheid Museum. So, you guys had to drag me out of there because I was taking my time to take it all in. So, when we got our tickets, right, either we had two separate entrances. So, either you got to enter from the whites only side
Or the non-white.
or the non-white, which was a deep reflection of what it would have been like during that time. So walking through the museum and learning about legalized or racial legalized discrimination, what were some of your kind of aha moments? I say aha because there's a lot of things when I walked through there I did not know at all.
It was a pretty huge museum, and I just was overwhelmed being there. I think having us enter through separate entrances based on what we were assigned to on the cards was really a great grounding moment, because you needed to remember what you were walking into. You're walking into the past, yet you are walking into someone's reality, that people had to live that. And so I thought the mirrors were very profound, because we had to walk down a corridor or a walkway, and then there were mirrors of people, and it was basically saying like you're walking in their shoes, or their different variations. And so from that point on, even though we were taking a trip through history, I still took it as a sign of reality. Like, this is a very real experience. It was a really big museum. I would have liked more time, but I don't even think there would be enough time to digest all of that. I think it's meant to be seen and a learning experience that's not just a one time. You have to continuously go back through it. I thought it was great to go back through the history and learn about the Zulu, and learn about the indigenous people of the land that we were on, and have that context on basically the gold rush experience that they had, because it really mirrored a lot of experiences in the United States, and how there's this newfound understanding of wealth, that it's not that you all aren't civilized, it's that you're sitting on something that we need. So how do we, capitalize off of that and enslave you and exploit you? And so
And
that was
divest you of your land.
Yeah, divest you of your land, your identity, separate you, enslave you, and take you from all that you know.
And then employ a strategy of rechanging, or I wouldn't even say rechanging, but a strategy of creating a history, right? Because here in the United States, it was, we took over the United States. It was manifest destiny. It was destined for the United States to conquer, take over land from the natives or the originals that were here, and move west, right? And so even there's this history, right? This history-telling, right? In which, through the colonial eyes of, Christianity or faith, of a needing to, as one person, 45 said it, to tame the land, right? But also introduce
new systems.
Introduce systems or introduce religion as a form of taking and stripping away resources as well.
It's so insidious because as you go through the museum, you still see how there's still this fight to reclaim the language, this fight to reclaim the history that was intentionally erased because those who write the history, of course, get to be the leaders, the ones who did what they had to do, the righteous ones. When you still have communities and people who are separated from their tribal understanding, like I forget where we were, but someone was talking about, I think it was in Langa, how they talk about, no, it might have been in Zimbabwe, how it was our driver, our tour guide on the safari was telling us about the native people, or was it the Zulu, they would send their young men off to the bush to learn how to become men. But that doesn't happen as much anymore because people are going off to college, or he was like, no, that's not me. That's not a part of who I am. And then you get to think and see how, if those traditions don't continue on, then who will write about them? Where will that be present? And what that does to the community. And how it's important
for us to carry on those traditions, or at a minimum, make sure that they're documented so that it becomes a part of our ongoing storytelling of our history. So we're going to move on to a lighter note so that we can work towards closing and wrapping up this podcast.
Oh, awesome.
Our safari.
Yes, safari.
The safari.
Yeah, which one?
Well, let's start.
We went on 2. We had the privilege of going on a tour in South Africa. And the ones that came up to our room, are you considered Zimbabwe?
No, I'm speaking of our safari that we did where we weren't supposed to change the shape of our vehicle.
That was the one in Cape Town. Okay. That was Joburg. Oh.
And then we had our safari that we did. Well, we did 2 safaris in Zimbabwe because we did the nighttime safari and we did the morning one. It was the nighttime one where we were on the river safari.
Oh, okay. So that was 3.
We did the river safari and then we did the regular safari. Okay. So what are your thoughts about that? What we did learn was you should never change the shape of the vehicle. Because you change the shape of the vehicle while you're looking at lions, it's not a good combination at all. So be still. That's what it's meant for when you go on a safari, to be still, to look and take pictures casually, but not change the shape of the vehicle.
Yeah, I just realized how beautiful nature was. Like, I really need to get more into Discovery Channel, because hearing them share the natural habits of animals, it really made me reflect on how we can be animalistic, or certain things that we've taken on to understand how we treat gender and how we treat people and our ways of life, how we just understand that as nature. When most of the time it's really not just nature. And so to be out there and see the different types of animals and get a sneak peek into their life, it was really awesome. And then almost getting attacked by a lion. I mean, I don't know how many people could say that they did that, and just how chill the drivers were about it. I was like, I'm gonna need more panic. Was this planned or not? Because y'all are just chill. But I thought it was just breathtaking and beautiful how much land there was. I'm not sure why, but I think it has a great deal to do with media. I just assumed it was going to be all dry and just desert-like, but it was very much so. It felt tropical at a lot of points and was very lush and very beautiful land. So I really enjoyed the safari, all 3 of them, and I'm grateful we got to see different versions, like the water one, the two of the lands, just hearing about the history, hearing about the realities. I really was upset to hear about the poachers, even though I've heard stories here and there. I think you get a different feeling when you go and look at an animal in their natural habitat and just think that people are killing them for fun.
Stop poaching.
Yeah.
Stop poaching.
How people are poaching them for remedies that aren't even real, that aren't even scientifically proven. So it was very heartbreaking to see that these animals are being slaughtered.
You want to know what I like too? Is sharing space with the natural environment. So we literally had to share space with hippos. We had to share space with monkeys. We had to share space with Pumbas, Timon, all of them, as we called them. But it was okay. We recognize that we coexist, and you coexist in a township. You coexist where you live. And so it became natural after a while.
It did.
Except the hippo that would not leave the door when I was knocking on my door to say, can someone please open the door, because I was panicking. But after a while you realize, oh, it's okay. We're sharing this space together, because even for us, we're encroaching on their habitat.
And I think that was a highlight for me as being there. The highlight came when we came from Victoria Falls, and I was thinking about going to get some food at a cafe, and I was like, oh, I'm so hungry. I want some French fries. Let's go to this cafe. And then I sat there and watched this man and his wife get mad and almost have a fight with this monkey that came and took their sugar, because that's what they see. And I'm like, here we are encroaching upon their natural habitat. And then, it just got me thinking back to gentrification, back to the comparisons of South LA, not black people. Dang, no, wait. I didn't mean that. Just made me think about how we have environments that people are naturally in, and then here comes some outside source to come and say, I'm going to decide to live here now because it's close to the airport. I'm sorry for historically throwing you and your people into this, unhealthy environment, but we want it back now. You have to leave. So I think that paying attention to nature and seeing how things naturally move is always going to be a great reminder of life, and of having that appreciation for life, but also reflecting on how that impact really looks like. I'm definitely happy I didn't get my French fries, because me and that monkey would have definitely been squabbing. No, I'm just playing. I would have let him have those fries. He looked pretty strong. But for me, and it really touched me like in a negative way to hear how the people were describing the monkey and the anger that they had, when it's like, you wanted this experience. Here you are eating here, and you're a part of a natural park. So it's a part of their territory. They're hungry. And here you have sugar, and you think that you're just going to be able to enjoy the opulence. And I like that kind of disturbance, because it snaps you back into reality.
Right. It does. So, just in our conversations alone, we learned a lot.
Yeah.
It's so much that you could pull from, because we learned about gender equity. We learned about racial equity. We learned a lot about health equity too. We learned about, what was I going to say? Climate change. Because even, I believe folks there were talking about how the climate was, the summers were a little bit longer. Even some places where they expected to have more rain hadn't come.
Like at Victoria Falls,
right?
How that affected the water.
And then we also talked about propaganda, how even American propaganda changes or influences the economy there. So, for example, especially the tourism economy, because if someone says, well, there's no water at Victoria Falls, then people decide, oh, well, I don't want to go tour Zimbabwe.
Predominantly tourist functioning economy.
Exactly. And they rely on that. So when you go there, like even before we went on our trip, right? one of the questions there in one of the articles that was sent
I
to
sent
us.
that article. I saw it on Facebook. Facebook globalization.
That there was no waters at the falls and that the falls were dry. But what
Partly
happened?
true. It depends on the timing of the season, the rainfall, and there hadn't been a lot of rainfall. So looking at specific angles, then you're gonna feel like there's not water, but it's not dry. It's not going dry.
Right.
So it's just always more to the story, and so it was very, very important that we had Pastor Sauls and his connections to go and ask, like, hey, go check out the water.
Right.
Y'all got water?
And even went to Victoria Falls United Methodist Church, and we had our exchange between our young adult leaders. You know, one of the gentlemen there who's a journalist said, can you please be sure when you go back to the United States, let them know that there's water at Victoria Falls.
Yeah.
Because things that we may not think are important that we put into social media, we put in various news outlets, it has an impact on our brothers and sisters in Africa, you know, and especially our brothers and sisters in Zimbabwe and South Africa. And we want to make sure that anything that's put out about them is correct and doesn't affect the economy, because that's what they live on and thrive on. So normally when we close our woke moments, we normally ask, you know, for you to share kind of like what was your woke moment, whether your woke moment is just simply one word, or your woke moment is a reflection or a thought or a question that you want to leave with the audience. So I'm going to ask you, what is your woke moment that you would like to leave with our audience?
Intentionality. I came back from South Africa with a strong sense of calm and belief in myself. I wasn't super insecure before I left, but I was worried about work, worried about, you know, things not going right, worried about what people thought about me. But I think intentionality will be my woke word, woke moment, because you do things with good intentions, you do things understanding what your intentions are, and then you are accountable for what, you know, what happens or how it may look. And you remember what your intentions are, but you're always ready to take in what needs to be learned. So intentionality.
Well, all right, audience, thank you for joining us for Woke Moments. And please think about what Tanisha shared. Let's lead with intentionality. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Woke Moment. For more information about our organization, please visit SOH.org. Subscribe to us for a Woke Moment wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at @SOH_LA and on Facebook and Instagram at Sanctuary of Hope LA.
Wake up!